Horse nomads took over Europe 5,000 years ago. David Reich. This is the title of a short video related to geneticist David Reich, and we consider his ancient DNA research as the trigger that will totally rewrite human history. Not from the East, but directly from the Americas, and consequently from the West. Despite all this, we claim these horse nomads not to come from the East, but directly from the Americas, and consequently from the West. This through navigating the Atlantic Ocean while taking advantage of gyres and currents that lead them to their destination. The number of migrants or replacers could not have been cradled and supported by the relatively limited and unproductive steppes they are claimed to have come from, which are only the steppes north of the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. We are quite confident that David Reich knows all this very well, but cannot speak out about it, at least not at this point in time, this for it being so disruptive, and he considers it inappropriate for it exactly him to be part of or the disrupting party, at least so before his colleagues are ready for the true and from scratch rewritten human history. Our claim is very simply proven because these horse nomads haplogroup is R1b, and the root of R1b is R1, which at the time only lay in the Americas, and even today still is present only in the Americas. This obviously ends up any out of Africa hypothesis, as well as any hypotheses assuming that the Neanderthal fraction originates from interbreeding of Homo sapiens or out of Africans, this with some group of Neanderthals, somewhere outside Africa 47,000 years ago. This at least so for the modern Europeans, which are the descendants of these horse nomads, whether these horse nomads come from the steppes in the East, or from the steppes in the Americas in the West. Something similar is also the case for all Western Eurasians and parts of the population of India. In fact, something similar is also the case for the rest of the world, except that the out-of-Americans will not come from the west through the Atlantic Ocean and currents, but from the east through the Pacific Ocean and currents, and will not carry R1b as in the former cases, but instead the specific out of the Americas ancestors of all other dominant haplogroups. Like for instance the Y-DNA haplogroup O, that is dominant second to the haplogroups related to R1b. Like also R1a. Horses and chariots. These horse nomads will bring and intensively use domesticated horses and advanced and for war and invasion effective chariots. This is not the first time. So the above was about 5,000 years ago. But the same occurs between Morocco and Libya, already at least 7,000 years ago, that is at least 2,000 years in before. At that time this region in North Africa was not the Sahara as we know it today, but a green Sahara instead. The people of that region carried R1b, but most of all E. So the horse nomads again could have been carrying once more R1b, and that is what we hypothesize, this at least until their true haplogroup is proven or R1b confirmed. At the same time and in the same region, mummies of the haplogroup R1b, but most of all E are found. At this point we speculate that those individuals that were mummified were elites. In other words, there were elites with R1b, and there were elites with E. Consensus claims that E is considerably older than C. We know that in the period from 47,000 to 41,000 years ago, C and R1b were carried by the early modern humans of the Aurignacian culture. And these were active dominantly north of the Mediterranean. So we speculate that possibly even before 47,000 to 41,000 years ago, E and R1b were carried by the early modern humans of a culture relatively similar to the Aurignacian culture. And that culture possibly was active south of the Mediterranean, or still in the Americas. What we have of evidence of or for our hypotheses and speculations is the DNA that was carried and left in place by their mummies, as well as the DNA that is carried and eventually migrated by the populations that received their DNA. Already breeding or domesticating horses. Probably in both cases these cultures were already breeding or domesticating horses. This at least, or possibly so, before they started to turn over and or went to their definitive destinations. Indo-Europeans. Indo-Europeans are associated primarily with the Y-DNA haplogroups R1a and R1b. Haplogroup C is linked to indigenous American and Asian populations, which are out of Americans that migrated and expanded through the Pacific Ocean expansions and the Austronesian expansions. Haplogroup E is prevalent in Africa and the Middle East, which also are out of Americans but migrated and expanded through the Atlantic Ocean expansions. Neither of these haplogroups is directly associated with the spread of Indo-European languages. Haplogroup R1b is especially common in Western Europe. According to consensus, haplogroup R1b is linked to the Yamnaya culture or the horse nomads, and supposed to have spread the Indo-European languages. According to Us of Origin for Existence, the haplogroup R1b is linked dominantly to out of Americans directly arriving through the northern European Atlantic facades and their rivers into Europe, as well as through the Western African facades and their eventual rivers into North Africa. Once haplogroup R1b overturned the Bronze Age cultures in the Mediterranean, these out of Americans will arrive directly through the Mediterranean and all its rivers, including through the Nile. Sea peoples. Or all out of America and nothing out of Africa. Y-DNA haplogroup R1b is found in parts of the regions where the sea peoples are hypothesized to have originated or settled, like Western Anatolia and the Eastern Mediterranean, and Y-DNA haplogroup E1b1b is also present in the Eastern Mediterranean. Y-DNA haplogroup C is less commonly associated with these regions in the context of the sea peoples, though it is found in ancient populations and modern groups in Asia and Oceania. Out of Africa 2 times improbable. Out of Africa becomes improbable. A. Because all out of Africans will be overturned in Europe and in North Africa around 5,000 years ago in Europe by the latest R1b variant, and around 7,000 years ago in Northern Africa by the in the region latest R1b variant, and possibly by E, after they at least were overturned once more before. B. A seemingly too scarce number of candidate out of Africans with a Neanderthal fraction, or at least a fraction similar to the Neanderthals, like the 13 individuals of Ranis in Germany, and the at least one individual in Barcho-Kiro in Bulgaria, which all went extinct, this latest at the time of the latest turnover, which is never later than 4,500 years ago. Resume, first E and C and next R1b. It all starts out at least 47,000 years ago, with C and Neanderthals in Europe, and, possibly earlier, with E and African Archaics and or possibly haplogroup A and B Archaics and minorities, like for instance San peoples and Pygmies in Africa. In Europe the R1b will dominate and turn over all humans from before 4,500 to 5,000 years ago, including any eventual out of African, as well as any Homo sapiens, or just any human carrying a Neanderthal fraction related to interbreeding with Neanderthals or not. The Neanderthal fraction. Roughly 2%, that today is recognized in modern Europeans, obviously comes from nowhere other than directly from the turning over out of Americans. Native Americans related to the Y-DNA haplogroups R1 and or R1b and R1a, or exactly the ones that turn over Europe, carry elevated frequencies of Neanderthal fraction, this while still in the Americas, and just the same after migrating to Europe, etc. Any Neanderthal fraction, whether it is 2% or not, that today is recognized in modern Europeans is unrelated to any Africans, and also unrelated to any European or Eurasian Neanderthals. Out of Africa and Neanderthal fraction improbable. As said before, calling something improbable is a nice way of saying something is impossible. Please comment with your doubts and remarks, as we pretend to complete or to remake this same video, for it to become more useful and or understandable for you and others. We do not pretend to feature popular, nor widely accepted videos, but rather to rewrite parts, especially of human history, that are scientifically proven to be improbable at this point in time. Also ask for more or better illustrations and or proofs, if this would be helpful. Please remember that you should not call yourself an alternative historian or historian, if you do not clarify at least some part of history, or do not add up with a fully scientifically supported history, or with a history without too many paradigms. Like consensus still fails to do so, and most historians, even alternative historians also fail to do so until now. Criticizing or doubting the historical vision or timelines of others, independent if this is consensus or mainstream or none of both, is not exactly being a historian, or at least not a historian that adds up to history. Thank you.